Well, good morning and welcome to today's daily message. I want to talk today about a subject that, on the face of it, doesn't seem to have much in the way of hope or light in it. Well, I'll come back to that later. The subject is lament, which can, of course, be over personal loss or, like some of the Old Testament prophets, over the state of the nation or indeed the world. It's a subject that we don't often talk about in church, and by that I mean church services, even less sing about. I struggle, in fact, to think of any songs or hymns that adequately express lament, especially more modern ones, and perhaps we miss out because of that. Malcolm Duncan, in his recent book Good Grief, comments on how important it is in gathered worship to allow time for lament, and how woefully equipped some churches are when their repertoire of songs only ever expresses victory and joy and celebration. We need songs, he says, that express trust in times of trouble and faith in times of fear. And there are a few around like that. See, worship isn't just expressing our praise and thanksgiving. It's being honest with God about how we really feel, because sorrow and loss are integral parts of our lives. In Psalm 88, for example, the writer is overwhelmed with sorrow and grief. He questions what happens after death. In the last verse he says, "You've taken from me friend and neighbour. Darkness is my closest friend." This is deep stuff, isn't it? It goes to the core of our very beings. Most of us, I'm sure, will have felt like that, either in the past or perhaps even now, especially after the loss of someone very close to us, a partner, a parent, a child. Dr. Dan Allende, a leading Christian psychologist, has said this: Christians seldom sing in the minor key. We fear the sombre. We seem to hold sorrow in low esteem. We seem predisposed to fear lament as a quick slide into doubt and despair, failing to see that doubt and despair are in fact the dark soil that is necessary to grow confidence and joy. To sing a lament against God in worship, he says, reveals far, far greater trust than to sing a jingle about how happy we are. Lament cuts through insincerity, he says, strips pretense, and reveals the raw nerve of trust that angrily approaches the throne of grace, but then kneels in awed, robust wonder. But the Psalms, invite us not to stay in our sorrow, even though that may never really go away, but to reach out to God in faith and trust. Mags Duggan, in her book God Among the Ruins, comments that true lament breaks upon the depths of our hearts to God. It's an act of courageous faith which invites God to enter into the pain of that broken open space and to be God there. The practice of lament, she said, is the most profound demonstration of trust in a loving God, because it demonstrates an unwillingness to let go of God, no matter how awful the situation. Lament hangs on, she says, and it is worship. This offering up of our pain honours God because it brings all that we are in the muddled mess of our lives and places it as an offering before God. There is one modern song of lament that I would like to share with you. You may have heard of Rend Collective, the Northern Irish worship band, who wrote such songs as Build Your Church and My Lighthouse. And in one of their CDs issued 2 or 3 years ago, among all their more upbeat numbers, they included a song called Weep With Me. It reflects, I think, some of the feelings and emotions expressed in many of the Psalms. And the refrain goes like this: Lord, will you weep with me? I don't need answers. All I need to know is that you care for me. Hear my plea. Are you even listening? Here in the shadows, I'll lift up an offering of praise. What was true in the light is still true in the dark. In other words, the God we know and worship when everything is going well for us is the same God who longs to meet with us in the dark times. The book of Lamentations, possibly written by Jeremiah, is full of loss and grief over the devastation of Jerusalem. Each chapter contains anguish and despair. But there are also glimpses that the writer hasn't given up on God's love and mercy. Chapter 3, verses 55 to 57. I called on your name, Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ears to my cry for relief. You came near when I called you, and you said, do not fear. And verses 22 and 23, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So where is hope in all this? Well, in Paul's great chapter on the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15, he says this in verse 19, if only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people to be pitied. He encourages us to look beyond whatever difficulties and sorrows we may face in this life, to that day when we will be in the very presence of Jesus, with new resurrection bodies, free from pain and sorrow and death. And that's the Christian hope, a sure and certain hope, guaranteed to us by all that Jesus achieved through his death and glorious resurrection. So in Paul's words, found in Colossians 1, continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. So my prayer today, especially for any who are in the midst of sorrow or grief, is that we may still reach out to God, whatever our situation, knowing that he cares and understands, and in so doing find new hope, comfort and strength, not just for today, but for all that is to come as we fix our eyes and our faith on Jesus. Amen.